Stand up when you speak to me." The words cracked through the ballroom like a gunshot, and Grace Monroe froze. Her fingers trembled on the armrests of her wheelchair, every muscle tensing as humiliation swept through her like fire. The glittering chandeliers above threw sharp reflections onto the polished floor, making the room feel even colder. $300 million hung on the deal tonight. 200 faces turned to watch the young CEO crumble under the weight of Stephen Hale's sneering voice. He stood over her, his breath sour with whiskey, his arrogance filling the silence like smoke. "Please," Grace whispered, her throat dry. "Don't hurt me." "I can't." She couldn't finish. The last word broke inside her chest. Laughter scattered across the crowd like shards of glass, polished executives and investors too cowardly to stop it. She felt every laugh pierce through her pride. Across the ballroom, a man paused mid-motion. His calloused hands, still damp from cleaning solution, tightened around a mop handle. His eyes hardened, going from weary to sharp in a heartbeat. That man was Daniel Reed. To most people in the room, he was invisible. Just a janitor wearing faded blue overalls and steel-toed boots that had long lost their shine. But inside him burned a memory of deserts, gunfire, and promises made to dying men. He didn't know Grace Monroe personally, only that she was the youngest CEO in Monroe Technologies history, and that she rolled through the same corporate hallways where people whispered about her being a liability. But Daniel had seen her once, early in the morning, struggling to navigate her wheelchair through the narrow lobby doors without help. He had seen the fire in her eyes then, the quiet defiance she wore like armor. And now, as Stephen Hale humiliated her in front of everyone, Daniel felt that old part of him, the soldier, the protector, stir awake. He stayed still for now, not because he was afraid, but because soldiers learn patience. He waited, watching as the scene played out. Grace's hands gripped the rims of her wheelchair, nails digging into her palms as she forced herself to speak. "Mr. Hale," she began, voice trembling but still hers. "You're out of line." Stephen laughed, loud and cruel. "Out of line? You can't even stand up for yourself, Grace." The crowd gasped, a ripple of discomfort spreading through the room. Someone muttered her name in pity. Others turned away, pretending not to see. Daniel's heart clenched. He'd heard men like Hale before, the kind who only felt powerful when others were small. The kind who broke people and called it leadership. But as Grace's lips trembled and her eyes glistened with shame, something in Daniel snapped. His hand tightened around the mop handle until his knuckles whitened. From the corner of the ballroom, he whispered under his breath, "That's enough." No one heard him. Not yet. That morning had been ordinary for him. Same alarm, same small apartment, same routine. He'd risen quietly so he wouldn't wake his daughter, Lily. She was 10 and slept with her arm wrapped around a stuffed rabbit that had lost one ear years ago. He'd made her lunch before dawn, peanut butter and jelly sandwich, an apple, a juice box, and left her a note in his careful handwriting. "You're braver than you think. Love, Dad." It was the kind of morning that reminded him why he kept going, why he worked a job that paid little but kept them fed, why he stayed invisible, because being invisible was safe, and safety was what Lily needed most. But safety was not what Grace Monroe had tonight. The ballroom had gone silent now, except for the thud of Grace's heart echoing in her ears. Stephen Hale stepped closer, towering over her, his shadow swallowing her completely. "Stand up," he said again, this time softer but more poisonous. Grace's lips parted, but no words came out. And that's when Daniel Reed set down his mop. He took one slow step forward, then another. The crowd didn't notice him yet, but they would, because sometimes even the quietest men carry storms inside them. In the next part, Daniel's past will resurface, revealing why a janitor who once saved lives in a war zone is about to risk everything for a stranger in a wheelchair. Daniel Reed woke before the city did. Always did. The rhythm of dawn was the only thing that hadn't changed since the war. He moved quietly through his small apartment on Chicago's South Side, careful not to wake his daughter. The walls were chipped, the carpet worn, but it was home. After years of living out of duffel bags and tents overseas, that was enough. In the soft glow of the kitchen light, he spread peanut butter over white bread, placed an apple beside it, and tucked a small note into Lily's lunch bag. He never skipped the note. "You're stronger than you think, kiddo. Love, Dad." He looked at the photograph taped to the fridge, a younger man in desert fatigues standing beside a silver-haired colonel beneath a blazing sun. His old unit, his old life. The ID card beneath it was scratched and bent, but the words engraved on it still caught the light. Honor before glory. Daniel rarely looked at it anymore. That part of his life was supposed to be buried, but lately, every time he saw that inscription, something stirred inside him. Something he thought he'd left behind when he traded his uniform for a mop. He took one last sip of bitter coffee, grabbed his work bag and slipped out into the hallway. Chicago was already waking up, sirens in the distance, buses rumbling past, the faint hum of trains heading north. He rode in silence, pressed between commuters too busy staring at their phones to notice the man standing beside them. That was fine by him. He'd learned long ago that being unseen could be a gift. When Daniel reached Monroe Tech Tower, he entered through the back, where no one looked twice at the janitorial staff. He clocked in, collected his supplies, and began his rounds. The 15th floor was his responsibility, the executive suites where glass and leather reflected wealth and self-importance. People brushed past him without making eye contact. To them, he wasn't a man. He was part of the background noise, the hum of elevators, the scent of polish, the faint squeak of rubber soles on tile. But Daniel saw everything. The glances, the whispers, the looks people gave Grace Monroe when they thought she couldn't see. He respected her, though he'd never spoken to her. Not because she was the CEO, but because she carried herself like someone who had every reason to quit, and didn't. He knew that kind of strength. By noon, he was in the cafeteria, wiping down tables when a group of young executives sat nearby, laughing too loudly. "Did you see the way she struggled getting into the elevator?" One of them said between snickers. "Stephen's right, she's a liability," another added. "The board's probably counting the days until he takes her spot." "She won't last the quarter," someone else muttered. Daniel's hand slowed on the table, cloth still in motion. He said nothing, just kept wiping, but their voices carved into him like knives. When the group left, he stood there for a long time, staring at the reflection of the overhead lights on the polished surface. People never knew when they'd gone too far, until they met someone who'd seen what cruelty could do. That evening, he picked up Lily from school. She came running out, pigtails bouncing, her backpack almost as big as she was. "Dad." "Guess what?" She beamed, holding up a paper with a gold star sticker. "I got an A on my science project." He grinned, lifting her onto his shoulders. "That's my girl. What was it about?" "Heroes," she said proudly. "I wrote about you." Daniel almost tripped. "About me?" "Mrs. Patterson said heroes are people who fix things that are broken," Lily said. "You fix things all the time, Dad." He didn't have an answer. He just smiled, throat tight, and carried her home through the crowded streets as her words echoed inside him. At dinner, Lily chattered about her classmates and her favorite book. Daniel listened to every word, thankful for the distraction. After she went to bed, he sat in the dark, holding the worn military ID in his hand again. Colonel Thomas Monroe, the man whose life he'd saved years ago in a desert halfway across the world. The man who'd told him, "Keep it, Sergeant. One day it'll mean something." He didn't know what the colonel meant until now, because tomorrow he'd be cleaning floors in a tower that bore the Monroe name. And something deep in his gut told him that the past wasn't done with him yet. Tomorrow's contract signing will bring every ghost Daniel tried to bury crashing back to life. And the janitor the world ignores will be forced to decide what kind of man he still is. The next morning broke cold and gray, the kind of Chicago dawn that felt more like steel than light. Daniel Reed stood at his window, coffee cooling in his hands, watching the city wake beneath the overcast sky. The train whistles echoed faintly, a reminder that the world kept moving whether you were ready or not. He turned to the kitchen counter where Lily's lunch sat neatly packed. Her note, folded twice, read, "Be kind even when others aren't. Love, Dad." He slipped it inside her bag with a soft smile. "Do you have your jacket, kiddo?" he asked when she came shuffling out, half asleep, dragging her backpack. "Uh-huh," she mumbled, hair sticking up in every direction. "You're working late again?" "Probably," he said, crouching to fix her collar. "But I'll be home before you dream too long." She nodded, and that was enough. After she left for school, Daniel grabbed his work badge and headed out into the wind. By the time he reached Monroe Tech Tower, something in the air already felt off. Too tense, too expectant. People hurried through the hallways whispering about the afternoon's contract. Signing $300 million and the future of the company. Daniel caught fragments of conversation while mopping the 15th floor. Board members flying in, Stephen Hale running the presentation. Grace Monroe looks pale. He stopped outside the executive conference room just as Grace's voice echoed faintly through the open door. Calm, steady, rehearsed, but he could hear the strain beneath it. The exhaustion of someone fighting too many battles alone. She rolled past him in her wheelchair not long after, wearing a navy suit that framed her strength more than her fragility. Her face was pale, her eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. Still, she nodded politely when she saw him. No one else did. Daniel's heart tightened. He'd seen that look before, the one soldiers wore before stepping into something they might not come back from. He kept cleaning, methodical, quiet. But around 11:30, something caught his attention. The conference room door stood slightly open, and a voice drifted through. Low and slick like oil. Stephen Hale. By tomorrow she won't know what hit her, he said into his phone, laughing softly. The board's already on my side. Once I embarrass her publicly, she's done. I'll have controlling interest before the ink dries. Daniel froze, his grip tightening around the mop handle until it creaked. You really think she's fit to lead? Hale continued. Can't even stand during a meeting. Hell, she can't even stand, period. The laughter that followed was short and mean. When the call ended, Stephen walked out, brushing past Daniel like he wasn't even there. Just another ghost in overalls, but Daniel's jaw was set. He'd seen men like Stephen before, ones who mistook cruelty for power, ones who thought decency was weakness. He'd also learned that standing by and doing nothing was its own kind of sin. He pushed his cart into the supply closet, closed the door behind him, and stared at himself in the mirror above the sink. The reflection that stared back wasn't just a janitor. Beneath the weary eyes and streaks of gray, the soldier was still there. 4 hours, he muttered to himself. 4 hours to decide who you are. He took out his phone and dialed a familiar number. Mrs. Chen? Could you pick up Lily from school today? Something came up at work. Of course, Daniel, she said gently. Is everything all right? It will be, he said quietly. I just need to take care of something. He ended the call, exhaled slowly, and pressed his palms against the sink. Grace Monroe didn't know it yet. But she wasn't going to stand alone tonight. As the afternoon faded toward the event, the city's lights flickered to life. Limousines lined the curb outside the tower. Reporters crowded the entrance, and inside, everything shimmered. Crystal chandeliers, champagne flutes, and whispered ambitions. Daniel walked past them all in his blue uniform, pushing his cleaning cart like a soldier walking into a battlefield no one else could see. And somewhere deep in the back of his mind, he heard his daughter's voice. Heroes fix things that are broken. He was about to find out if he still remembered how. As the ballroom fills with power and pretense, Daniel takes his first step toward the stage, unaware that by the end of the night, every secret from his past will come crashing into the spotlight. By late afternoon, Monroe Tech Tower had transformed into something out of a magazine spread. The top-floor ballroom gleamed with crystal chandeliers and polished marble floors. Round tables wrapped in ivory linen surrounded a long stage where the contract signing would take place. Every detail screamed perfection, except for the unease that hung in the air. Grace Monroe sat near the front, her wheelchair positioned neatly beside the signing table. She'd practiced her speech 100 times in her apartment mirror. Every word had been measured, every breath rehearsed, but none of that could steady her shaking hands now. $300 million, 200 pairs of eyes, and one mistake away from losing everything her late father built. Across the room, Stephen Hale was already holding court. His confidence filled every inch of space. He clinked his champagne glass against others, flashing his perfect smile as if the night already belonged to him. Grace looked down at her lap, willing herself to breathe. Just get through it. When the chairman finally called her name, she rolled forward, the soft hum of her motor chair cutting through the whispers. Her palms felt slick against the controls, but her voice, when it came, was steady. She spoke about innovation, about rebuilding trust after hard years, about what her father believed, that leadership wasn't about power, it was about responsibility. For a few moments, the crowd listened. Some even nodded. Hope flickered in her chest like a match trying to stay lit. Then Stephen Hale's voice sliced through the applause. "Very inspiring," he said loudly, stumbling a bit as he rose from his chair. The slight slur in his words made the nearby guest stiffen. He'd been drinking. Everyone could tell. "But tell me, Grace," he went on, smirking, "how can someone who can't even stand on her own lead anyone else?" The room froze, Grace's face drained of color. A single heartbeat of silence stretched into forever. "Stephen," the chairman warned, voice tight. "Oh, come on," he laughed. "We're all thinking it. She can't even walk. What kind of future is that?" Gasps rippled across the ballroom. Grace wanted to disappear. Every insecurity she'd buried clawed its way to the surface. Her breath caught. Her throat burned. "Please," she whispered, barely audible. "Don't do this." But he was past reason now, drunk on attention, on arrogance, on cruelty. He leaned closer, his shadow swallowing her. "Stand up when you talk to me," he said. A tremor ran through her body. I can't." Laughter, soft at first, then louder. "The kind that bruises more deeply than any shove." Grace's chest tightened. Her vision blurred, and then a calm, steady voice came from the back of the room. "Touch her again," it said, low and certain. "And you'll regret it." Every head turned. Daniel Reed stood near the wall. Still in his janitor's uniform, the cleaning cart beside him. The mop was gone. His posture had changed, shoulders squared, eyes cold as steel. Stephen frowned, blinking. "Who the hell are you?" Daniel walked forward, each step measured, deliberate. The crowd parted instinctively. There was something about the way he moved. Controlled, lethal, unshakable. "Just someone who knows better than to hurt people who can't fight back," Daniel said quietly. "Get security," Stephen snapped. Now, 2 guards moved in, but Daniel lifted one hand. "Don't. I'm not here to fight." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, dented military ID. It caught the chandelier light as he set it on the table beside Grace. "My name is Daniel Reed," he said. "United States Army, Search and Rescue Division. 3 tours." The silence was absolute. He looked directly at Stephen. "You can keep shouting or you can remember what decency looks like." Stephen tried to laugh, but the sound came out hollow. "You think anyone here cares about your little war story?" "No," Daniel said simply. "But I do." Then, faster than anyone could follow, he shifted, redirecting the first guard's grab, spinning him harmlessly to the floor, and stepping aside as the second stumbled into a chair. It was over in seconds. No one hurt. Just stunned silence. Daniel turned back to Stephen, his voice calm. "Apologize to her. Excuse me?" Stephen sputtered. "She built this company. She worked harder than anyone here." "The only disability in this room," Daniel said, his gaze unwavering, "is your lack of humanity." The words hung in the air like thunder. Phones came out. Cameras flashed. And in that moment, Stephen Hale realized he was losing control, not just of the room, but of everything. He stammered, glancing around at the crowd staring at him, recording every second. "I didn't mean—" "Yes, you did," Daniel said softly. "But you can still choose to be better." The ballroom seemed to hold its breath. Finally, Stephen's shoulders slumped. "I'm sorry." Grace stared up at him, speechless, her heart pounding so hard it hurt, and somewhere in the corner a ripple of applause began, hesitant, then growing louder until the entire room was on its feet. As applause fills the ballroom, a familiar voice from the crowd will soon reveal who Daniel Reed truly is, and why the moment he stepped forward was never a coincidence at all. For a long moment, the applause didn't stop. It filled the ballroom like thunder, breaking against the high ceilings and rolling back in waves. Grace Monroe sat frozen, her pulse pounding in her ears. Daniel Reed stood beside her, unmoved by the noise, his expression unreadable, calm, steady, and strangely distant. Then, from the stage, an older man's voice broke through the clamor. "Sergeant Reed, is that really you?" The crowd quieted instantly. Heads turned as an elderly figure in a military dress uniform stepped forward, chest heavy with medals that glimmered under the chandeliers. General Whitaker, someone whispered. He's on the company's board. Daniel turned slowly toward him. Sir? The general's eyes widened. My God, it is you. He descended the steps faster than his years should have allowed, stopping right in front of Daniel. For a second, neither man spoke. Then Whitaker's voice broke, hoarse with disbelief. This man saved my life. Gasps rippled through the audience. The general faced the crowd now, gesturing toward Daniel. It was Syria 2009. Our convoy hit an IED. I was trapped in a burning vehicle. Everyone thought I was dead. Everyone but him. Grace's eyes filled with tears. He ran through gunfire, Whitaker continued, his voice cracking. Pulled me out, then went back. Twice more. Dragged 2 others to safety before the fuel tank exploded. I owe him my life. Daniel's jaw tightened. Just doing my job, sir. No, the general said firmly, shaking his head. You were being a hero. And apparently you still are, even when no one's watching. Applause erupted again, stronger this time. Not polite clapping, but something real. Grace pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. She couldn't believe it. The man who had stood up for her, who cleaned her office floors, was the same man who'd once dragged soldiers out of flames. Then General Whitaker noticed the small metal ID card resting beside her. He picked it up, turning it over carefully. Where did you get this, Sergeant? Daniel hesitated, his gaze lowering. From a man named Colonel Thomas Monroe. The entire room seemed to stop breathing. Grace's head snapped up. What did you say? Daniel's voice softened. 13 years ago. Different war, same story. I pulled him from a burning convoy. He gave me that card before he passed from cancer. Said to keep it, that one day it might mean something. The general turned the card over. On the back, scratched but clear, were the words in her father's handwriting. Honor before glory. Whitaker's eyes flicked to Grace. Colonel Monroe was your father, wasn't he? She nodded, unable to speak. Her father's motto, the same one etched into every plaque in the building, the same one Daniel had carried all these years. Grace reached out with trembling hands and took the card from the general. You saved my father's life, she whispered, her voice breaking. And tonight, you saved mine? Daniel's composure cracked for the first time. I didn't know, Miss Monroe. I swear I didn't know who you were. But you were still there, she said, tears slipping down her cheeks. All this time, watching, protecting, without even realizing why. The weight of it hung between them, years of invisible connection. 2 lives bound by a single act of courage across time. Daniel dropped to one knee beside her wheelchair, his voice low. Your father was a good man. He talked about you every day. Said you'd grow up and change the world. Grace choked out a soft laugh through her tears. He said that? He was right, Daniel said quietly. The ballroom was silent again, hundreds of eyes on them, yet the moment belonged only to the 2 of them. General Whitaker placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder. Colonel Monroe would be proud of both of you, he said. The chandeliers above shimmered as if the entire room breathed together. The weight of fate pressing in from all sides. Some debts, Grace thought, aren't meant to be repaid in money or favors. Some are meant to circle back when you need them most. As she looked at Daniel, this man who'd been invisible until the moment he stepped into the light, she felt something shift deep inside her. Not gratitude, not pity, something deeper, something like recognition. And then, before she could speak again, a voice echoed sharply from the entrance, sharp, angry, and trembling with humiliation. This isn't over, Stephen Hale shouted, flanked by 2 lawyers. His face was red, his composure shattered. You think this changes anything? She's still unfit to lead. The applause died instantly. The warmth in the room turned cold. Daniel stood slowly, his expression hardening. Grace's fingers tightened around her father's ID tag. She'd already lost too much to let him take one more thing. As Stephen Hale storms back into the ballroom to reclaim control, Grace Monroe will find her voice and prove that strength doesn't come from standing, but from refusing to fall. The room that had been filled with reverent silence now bristled with tension. Stephen Hale stood at the ballroom entrance, his tie crooked, his lawyers hovering like shadows behind him. His face burned with rage and humiliation. This doesn't change anything, he shouted. She's still unfit to lead this company. The applause vanished like a candle blown out. Conversations died mid-word. The same people who had cheered a moment ago now looked away, afraid to be noticed. Grace Monroe took a deep breath, fingers curling around the smooth edge of her father's old ID tag. For a heartbeat, the familiar fear returned, the same cold paralysis that had haunted her since the accident. But this time she didn't let it win. Daniel Reed stepped forward, his tone calm but deadly steady. "You should stop now, Stephen," Hale laughed bitterly. "You think you can scare me again? You're just a janitor who got lucky." Daniel didn't move closer, didn't raise his voice. Luck had nothing to do with it. Grace's pulse was pounding in her ears. She looked from Daniel to Stephen and realized something. She didn't need him to defend her anymore. "Not tonight. Mr. Hale," she said, her voice clear and unwavering. "You're right." Stephen blinked, thrown off. What?" "You're right," she repeated. "I can't walk. I can't stand up. I'll never run another race or climb another staircase without help." The crowd shifted uneasily, whispering. Grace's gaze swept the room, steady and unflinching. "But I'll tell you what I can do," she continued. "I can lead. I can make decisions that shape the future. I can build teams, inspire innovation, and make this company thrive. The only thing I can't do is stoop to your level." Her words sliced through the air. "The only disability in this room is cowardice," she said, eyes locking on Stephen. "And you wear it like a crown." A collective murmur rippled through the audience. Stephen's jaw worked, but no words came. "You think strength is about standing tall?" Grace pressed on, her voice rising. "It's about refusing to break, no matter how many times the world tries to knock you down. That's something you'll never understand." She turned to the audience now, her tone softer but every word landing like a hammer. "My father built this company on a single principle: honor before glory. He believed that how you treat people matters more than what you achieve. Tonight, a man in a janitor's uniform reminded us what that really means." All eyes turned to Daniel. He stood quietly at her side, trying to blend into the background again, but there was no hiding him now. Grace faced Stephen again. "So here's what's going to happen. This contract gets signed, this deal goes through, and anyone who doubts my leadership," she paused, letting the silence build, "is free to walk out." Not a single person moved. Stephen's complexion had gone pale. "You don't have the authority—" "Yes," Grace interrupted, "I do." She turned toward the board members seated along the stage. "And as for you, Mr. Hale, effective immediately, you're terminated." The room gasped. "You can't do this." He barked, his voice cracking. Grace's tone was razor-sharp. "Security will escort you out." Two uniformed guards appeared from the back, moving toward him. He tried to resist, to bluster, to intimidate, but it was over. Every face in the room was watching, and none were on his side. "This isn't over," he shouted again as the guards grabbed his arms. Daniel stepped forward, meeting his eyes. "Yes," he said quietly. "It is." The doors closed behind Stephen Hale with a heavy finality, his last shout echoing off the walls before dying into silence. Then, from somewhere in the back, someone began to clap. It spread slowly at first, then faster, louder until the entire ballroom stood. The sound was deafening, but it wasn't just applause. It was release. It was vindication. Grace sat at the center of it all, tears spilling freely down her cheeks. Daniel stood beside her, still as a statue, overwhelmed by the weight of it all. When the cheers finally faded, she turned to him. "Thank you," she said softly. "For standing up when I couldn't." Daniel shook his head. "You didn't need me. You were already standing." Their eyes met and held, a silent acknowledgement of everything they'd both endured to reach this moment. But just as calm began to return to the room, the ballroom doors burst open again. A small figure ran across the polished floor, her backpack bouncing, sneakers squeaking against the marble. "Daddy." Daniel barely had time to react before Lily flung herself into his arms. The entire room went still again, this time not in fear, but in awe. As Daniel's daughter rushes into his arms before a stunned crowd, an even deeper truth will unfold, one that will change both their lives and Grace Monroe's forever. "Daddy!" Lily's small voice carried through the vast ballroom like sunlight breaking through clouds. She ran straight into Daniel's arms, nearly knocking him backward. The crowd, Executives, reporters, board members watched in stunned silence as the janitor-turned-hero knelt to hold his daughter. He hugged her tightly, burying his face in her hair. "Lily, what are you doing here?" She was breathless with excitement. "Mrs. Chen saw it on TV. Everyone's talking about you. She said you're a hero, so she drove me here." Daniel's eyes widened. TV? All around them he noticed phones flashing, cameras filming, people whispering. The story had already spread beyond these walls. The janitor who stood up for the CEO. It was everywhere. He gently set Lily down, his voice soft but firm. "Hey, sweetheart, I'm no hero. I just did what anyone would do." She shook her head fiercely. "That's not true." A few people near the front chuckled, moved by her earnestness. Lily placed her tiny hand over her father's heart. "You're my hero. Mrs. Patterson says heroes fix things that are broken." "You fix everything." Daniel's throat tightened. He couldn't speak. The world blurred for a second. Ballroom, chandeliers, applause, all fading until there was only her. Grace Monroe watched them from her wheelchair, her own eyes wet. She had faced down cruelty, humiliation, and doubt, but this simple exchange, the love between a father and daughter, undid her completely. Lily turned to Grace with the unfiltered curiosity of a child. "Are you Miss Monroe?" Grace smiled gently through her tears. "I am. My dad saved your life today," Lily said proudly. Grace's voice trembled. "He saved more than that, sweetheart. He reminded me who I am." Lily nodded solemnly, then beamed. "He's good at that." The crowd laughed softly, the tension finally breaking. For the first time all night there was warmth, real, human warmth in the room. General Whitaker stepped forward again, his expression proud but measured. "Sergeant Reed," he said, "a word?" Daniel stood, glancing at Grace. She nodded. "Go," she whispered. He followed the general to a quiet corner near the edge of the ballroom. Whitaker studied him for a moment, eyes filled with both admiration and concern. "I heard you've been working here as a janitor." "Yes, sir," Daniel said quietly. "That's honorable work," the general replied, "but it's not your calling." Daniel's jaw tightened. "It's what I needed. After the service, I wanted to be invisible, to give Lily a normal life." Whitaker nodded slowly. "And you did. But you've also been hiding from the world and from yourself." He paused. "This company, this country still needs men like you. I'm telling you now, Grace Monroe is going to offer you something. A chance to come back into the light. Say yes," Daniel gave a faint smile. "You can't give me orders anymore, General." Whitaker's eyes softened. "Then consider it advice, from someone who knows what it's like to owe you his life." The general squeezed his shoulder before walking away. Lily tugged on Daniel's sleeve. "What did he say, Daddy?" Daniel knelt beside her, his voice low. "He said things might be changing for us. Good changes, like ice cream for dinner." She grinned. He laughed for the first time that night. A real laugh. Maybe even better. Across the room, Grace was speaking quietly with her board. The media cameras had gathered near the stage now, recording everything. The janitor, the child, the CEO in her wheelchair. But the noise no longer mattered. What mattered was the calm between them. Grace rolled her chair toward Daniel, her expression warm but thoughtful. "You once told Stephen Hale that heroes don't need power to do what's right," she said. "I believe that. But I also believe people like you deserve to lead too." Daniel hesitated. "Grace, I'm offering you a position," she interrupted gently. "Head of safety and training? It's not just a job, it's purpose. For both of us." For a long moment, Daniel didn't answer. He looked at Lily, his reason, his anchor, and saw the pride shining in her eyes. Then he nodded slowly. "Yes," Grace's smile deepened. "Good." A wave of applause spread through the ballroom again, this time softer, more human. No grandeur, no spectacle. Just quiet recognition of something true. Daniel looked at Grace and saw not a CEO, not a woman in a wheelchair, but someone who had fought her own battles, alone, and finally won. Grace looked at him and saw the same. Lily squeezed her father's hand. "Told you you're a hero," Daniel smiled down at her. "No, kiddo. Heroes don't need capes. They just need a reason to be brave." Grace reached out her hand toward his. "And sometimes," she said softly, "they find that reason when the world needs them most." The three of them stood, together, unbroken. The ballroom around them fading into applause, light and something like peace. Outside, the city of Chicago glowed against the night, unaware that inside that tower, a janitor, a CEO, and a little girl had just rewritten what strength looked like. And for the first time in years, Daniel Reed didn't feel invisible. He felt seen. He felt home.